Good afternoon, everyone. This is Queenie Clem with Queenie's Book Talk and Reviews, and I am your literary ambassador. And today we have Contessa Cooper. She is a parent of an autism child, and that's what we'll be talking about today. Welcome, Contessa.
Thank you so much for having me on here. It is such a pleasure. Let me tell you something. I was thrilled when you asked me to come on there. I was like, absolutely, anything that you need.
Okay, tell us a little about your life and your journey with your son.
I tell people that I've been doing autism for almost 30 years. Like, I don't know how my son became 30 because I don't look like I should have a 30-year-old kid. I look barely, a little over 30 myself, but it came as a surprise to me with the autism diagnosis. This wasn't the journey that I thought I was going to have in my life. And I tell people I didn't even want children at all. And I got 2 of them and became an autism advocate. And, I call myself, I'm the person that people come to when they have questions. I'm the person people come to because I've done it. I've been there, done that. Yes, some things have changed, but autism hasn't changed. And to be able to talk to someone who has been through everything, through, first finding out about the diagnosis, thinking, hey, something is definitely not quite right with my kid, and I don't know what to do, and dealing with the school system and dealing with things like puberty, the teenage years, dealing with, graduating or not graduating, figuring out what to do now that they're an adult, and then the changes that you go through as being a parent and then a caregiver, because it's not the same role. Once they hit, they're always going to be your kid, right? But once they hit adulthood, you can't be telling them what to do. You can't, or you're going to be grounded. You can't do this. You can't do that. It's a totally different role now. It's more of helping them manage their life. And that's where I am, helping him to manage this life instead of actually parenting him. So yeah, it has been a journey, and I love telling people about it.
All right. Now, autism, how would you describe it? What is the definition?
So autism is not a learning disability, even though people on the spectrum can have learning disabilities. It's not a physical disability. It's a cognitive disability, which means that there's this list of things that whoever's diagnosing your child, they have to check mark it. And there's certain amount of check marks they have to have. But some of the things is lack of social skills. Maybe like, my child has great social skills. Do they? Just because they talk and interact? Are they only talking about the things that they're interested in? Are they able to have a two-way conversation? Are they able to look at someone's expression and say, hey, maybe they're not interested in what it is I'm talking about, or maybe I'm boring them, or maybe, they want to talk about the things that they want to do. How is their social interaction, right? Some of individuals with autism have an issue with empathy, empathizing with other people, not knowing if they're happy and they're sad, showing emotions. Some individuals, like I said, on autism may have some sort of learning disability, may have a problem with speech, may have a problem with gross motor and fine motor skills. They call it a spectrum for a reason, because your child can be one of many places on this large spectrum that they call autism. But there are signs, right? Things that they tell you to look at. Eye contact is one. Some kids have it, some kids don't. When I was looking at my child, I realized that my child didn't respond to his name. He didn't play with toys the way that other kids played with toys. It wasn't appropriate play. Instead of playing with the car or having imaginative play, he would line things up. and things always had to have a specific place. And if you messed it up, oh my gosh, there'd be a meltdown, right? Not interacting with certain people, being very, very particular about certain fabrics on their skin, or the light being too bright or too dark, or different temperatures of the water, or brushing their teeth, anything sensory could be one of the signs. And those are the things that they look for. There's early intervention checklists all over the internet to help you be like, maybe I should talk to someone about my kid, because they're doing things a little bit differently than what some of the other kids are doing. And deep down inside, most of us know something's not quite right.
Okay. What is high functioning autism?
So high functioning autism, and it's, again, with autism, it's really hard to have specific definitions, but those individuals with high functioning autism, most of the time, you don't know that they have autism. They are very social. They talk a lot. They talk to other people. They interact. Some of them have a lot of friends, or seem to have a lot of friends. Some of them do very well in school in specific subject matters and specific topics. They, don't have problems with bathrooms. They are very independent
Yes.
in their skills, right? But there's something that we call them, they may seem a little quirky. And that's what people say is, such and such is a little quirky. They're a little odd, right? And that's what you'll notice. You'll be like, little Johnny over there, he talks a lot, but he only talks about trains. And he knows everything about trains. And that's all he talks about is trains, or baseball, or Janet. She knows everything about Janet Jackson. And that's all she talks about is Janet Jackson. She'll sit there, have a conversation with you for 2 hours about Janet Jackson, right? But she may have a problem keeping friends because that's all she talks about is Janet Jackson, right? And so those are some of the characteristics of someone who has high functioning autism. And you're shaking your head like, yep, a couple people came to mind, didn't they?
Yes, especially when you said trains.
Trains used to be a big thing, right? I don't know what it is with boys and trains, but they just love trains for some reason.
Yes. What are some common myths about autism?
Well, number one, you can't catch it. And you can't catch it from being around someone that has autism. There was a myth that you couldn't have multiple people in your family that have autism, and we know that that's not true. You can have, siblings that have autism. There was a myth that it only affected boys and not girls, and we know that that's not true. It just shows up differently in girls than it does boys. There was a myth that there are savants. There are those that have autism that are almost genius level, right? That's very, very few, maybe 3% of the population are savants or extremely gifted in art or music and things like that. And so there are shows on TV like The Good Doctor or Rain Man, and people are like, oh my gosh, autism is so great and so wonderful. They can do all this stuff. And I've had someone tell me, oh my gosh, you must be so glad that your kid has autism because I'm sure he's really good at this and that. I was like, where did you get that from? That is a myth. Okay, that's not what goes on in most of our households. I call that Hollywood autism. Please don't watch that and think that's what's going on in our homes, because that is not true. And those are the common myths.
Okay. What therapies are used for autistic children, or what did you have to use with your son?
So speech therapy is a big one. A lot of our kids have some issues with speech forming words. They're of course having tutors because there could be some delays in learning particular things. So they may be behind in school. OT, occupational therapy, is one. I know that my son had issues tying his shoes. He still cannot tie his shoe. And so he was doing some occupational therapy and some physical therapy, especially if there's some low muscle tones or not being able to do, gross motor and fine motor things. The thing that's really popular right now is ABA therapy, or applied behavioral analysis.
Mm-hmm.
And that's coined as autism therapy. That is the therapy that insurance pays for. There's a lot of controversy behind that type of therapy. Some parents love it, some parents don't. There are a lot of individuals who are now adults that says that ABA therapy did more harm than good for them. And so as a parent, you have to decide what is best for your child. Just because insurance will pay for it doesn't mean it's the best thing. When my son was growing up, insurance didn't cover ABA therapy. So we didn't have ABA therapy because ABA therapy was expensive. That's something only wealthy people could pay for. And ABA therapy back then could cost $50,000 to $60,000 a year to have someone come into your home and have therapy. And so we found other ways in order to help him. And there are all types of alternative therapies out there. A lot of people use food therapies. The gluten-free, casein-free therapy, sugar-free therapy, making sure that your foods are pure foods, no preservatives, no sugars, no dyes, none of the major allergens. Some people have had success with it, some people haven't. It's really important, and I tell people this, it's really important to know your child and to track progress. I tell people, don't try 50,000 therapies at once. Figure out what's important to you, try that therapy, and try it for at least 6 months. And when I say try, I mean give it everything you have for 6 months and track it to see whether or not you're seeing success or not. Because doing a diet and doing it halfway, that's not going to work. And these therapies are time consuming. It's 100% or not at all. You can't decide that you're going to be gluten-free, but every Friday you guys are eating at Burger King. It doesn't work like that at all. It's either all or none. You can't decide to do ABA therapy and the only time your child has it is when the therapist is at the house, and you as a parent are implementing the strategies on the weekends, or you're not implementing the strategies when they're going to daddy's house. It's something that's always there, because that's the only way you can see if there's change is with consistency.
Okay. What types of medication are used to treat this?
There is no medication. There is no cure for autism. Now, what they do use medication for is what I call, things they may come up. So there's no medication for autism, but if your child has autism plus sensory issues, there could be medications for that. If your child has autism plus gut issues, there are medication for the gut issues. If your child has autism plus ADHD, well, now there's medications for ADHD, but there's no medications. When you go in and your doctor says your child has autism, they're not writing a script to give you medications for it, because there isn't any at all. The only thing that they may prescribe is ABA therapy. And again, it's because most insurances now will pay for a certain amount of hours for ABA therapy. That's it. But there is no medication. There is no cure. I don't care what you read on the internet. There is no cure for autism.
Okay. Are dietary interventions helpful?
Absolutely, just like they are for you and just like they are for me, right? And so eating the very best food possible is good for everyone, right? Eating whole foods, eating foods that are organic, eating foods that are free of preservatives, that are free of dyes, that are free of sugar. That's good for everyone. And it's definitely going to be good for your child. Where there may be issues is if you have a child who's particular, very picky about their food because of sensory issues. They may not like the way a food looks. They may not like the way the food tastes. They may not like the way the food feels in their mouth. And so sometimes you have to trick your child into eating it by hiding nutrients in things like spaghetti sauce. You can blend up a whole bunch of vegetables and make it liquid and stick it in spaghetti sauce if your child likes spaghetti. You know, there are vitamins that you can give your child. If your child likes milkshakes or smoothies and things like that, you can add extra nutrients. There are, for kids who have extreme food rigidities, there are therapies. There are food therapists out there that will work with your child to help introduce new foods. Now, what I will say, if your child is stuck on chicken nuggets and French fries, it's not going to kill them. I promise you. If that is the only thing that your child will eat right now, it's going to be okay. You know, if that's the only thing they eat now for the next 5 years, then you may want to think about doing something to help introduce new and healthy foods. But for right now, if your child's 3 and 4 years old and all they want is chicken nuggets, that's all most kids want. So I wouldn't worry too much about that thing. It's just as they get older and they refuse to try new foods, that's when you may want to talk to your pediatrician about seeing what you can do to help introduce new kids and introduce new foods. And there are, you know, that's some of the things that I can have resources and stuff like that to help you with if that's something that you need.
Okay. As far as education, can you explain what an IEP is?
That is your individual educational plan. That's what happens when you decide, your teacher decides, the school system decides that your child is now in special education. That IEP is a legal document that outlines any modifications, any help, any type of assistance, and the amount of hours and how certain educational plans are implemented for your child. That's one of the things. You have a meeting every single year that goes over it. And what a lot of parents don't understand is you as a parent are in charge of that plan. You have the right to sign it or not sign it. And I tell most of my new parents, especially if this is your first meeting, don't sign that piece of paper until you take it home and you read it. Because when you're sitting there and you have the principal and the educator and special eds and all these specialists around you and they're staring at you like this, it's extremely intimidating. Yes. Especially because they use language that you don't normally use. So you have the right to take that home and in your quiet time, read it and ask questions. Again, you're in charge. There is a handbook that they give you that tells you all of your rights that most parents don't read. That you should read and understand. There are things called educational aids, educational therapists, educational advocates that can help you understand what it is you're about to sign, because once you sign it, it's a done deal. Until next time, you can request another meeting to help get some changes, but it's a lot harder to change something once you've already signed it, because that is giving the school permission to do only what is in that document and nothing else. Nothing else. And so that is one of the most important meetings that you can go to when it comes to your child's education. And I'm sure that you can agree with me with that one.
Yes. Does autism usually qualify as a disability according to the Social Security Administration?
Yes. However, autism would have to be the primary disability, right? And so your child could have several different disabilities. And what they do is they go in there and they have their own evaluation.
Mm-hmm.
And they could possibly say, because your child's primary is this, they don't qualify. And so, I just had to go and requalify. Even though there's no cure for autism, and my son is 29 years old, you still have to go and requalify under Social Security. And they're going to want to see your child. They're going to want to have medical records. It's a whole thing. And some people are denied. And you have to go back and you have to fight and get more paperwork and things like that. So just because your child has autism doesn't mean they're going to automatically qualify for Social Security. They could. They also could not, and that's the struggle. You just don't know. But if you think that you should have it, apply, keep applying, appeal, keep appealing, because this is just me and my experience, they want to tell you no.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's up to you to prove that the answer is yes.
Yes.
My child deserves this assistance.
Mm-hmm. Explain respite care.
Respite care means you as a mom, as a dad, as a caregiver deserve the right for rest. You deserve right to have some time away from your child for your own mental health. And so depending on where you live, it could be the city, the county, or the state that can award you respite hours, which means that somebody qualified can come in for a certain amount of hours, a day, a week, a month, and care for your child so you can go and do whatever for a certain amount of time. There are organizations that also have respite care. There's a huge church that we have down the street that offer respite where you can actually drop your child off for a certain amount of time so you can go and sleep. So you can go and hang out with your friends, so you can go grocery shopping, so you can do whatever it is you want. They don't monitor what you do with those hours away, but it is a good way to get some alone time for your mental health. And I am a big advocate of you need to take care of you. Because if you are tired and worn out and depressed, you are not in the very best position to care for your child the way that they need. So it's important that you take care of you as a mom, dad, parent, and caregiver. You need time alone.
Yes. Okay, describe a typical day at your house.
Well, see, this is the typical day at my house when my child was younger. It's totally different now that he's an adult. Man, let me tell you something. Some of those younger years, whoo, I didn't think one of us was gonna make it, right? Like, I don't know which one of us is not gonna be here, but I'm gonna try, because he was definitely a challenge when he was younger. Now, I might see him once a day. We live in the same house, right? But I might see him once a day because he has his own routine and he does his own thing. So as a caregiver, I don't do much for him. This is a child, and some of you guys have heard my story, some of you have not. They told me to lock my child up. They told me to put my son in an institution because he would never be able to do anything on his own, because my child has autism, plus he has an intellectual disability. So back then we called it some mental retardation.
Mhm.
That's my son. And so they were like, put him away, don't worry about him, go get you a new one. They're like, go make you another baby to replace him, basically. But he cooks independently. He cleans independently. You know, he does his own laundry. He spends his time now, you know, we're all on quarantine, but he is in complete control. He loves being on the internet. You know, he watches videos. He knows how to work YouTube. He does all those great things. And we had him enrolled in social programs. So every week he was going out. Now he doesn't drive. Um, so I take him, but we would take him, and he had dances he'd go to. He had social club that he went to. He had all these things that he was involved in. And so basically all I had to do was I buy him food and I'm his chauffeur. And that's all that I have to do now that he's an adult. But before, it was me. I had to tend to all of his needs 24/7 because he doesn't sleep a lot. He maybe sleeps 2 hours, 3 hours a night. And so imagine being 6 years old and only sleeping 2, 3 hours a night, which means that when they're awake, they're up doing something.
Mm-hmm.
And I couldn't sleep. So I had to make sure that he wasn't doing anything that's going to cause harm.
Mm-hmm.
And it took him a long time to be potty trained. So I was, you know, he was still 8 years old in diapers that I had to change and make sure that he was okay. And you know, he didn't like to eat certain foods, so he had a lot of problems with eating. Didn't want to eat anything green, nothing nutritious ever. Couldn't do homework on his own. You know, had some issues dressing on his own. All those things that we worked on, and so I had to be there for all of his needs, 24/7. And so I'm glad now that we are in a phase of rest. Me as a caregiver, I can finally rest. And I know that's a blessing. That's not true for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
You know, some people now, you know, they're 27, 28 years old and still are in adult diapers and still have problems feeding themselves and dressing themselves and things like that. And that's the thing with autism, is that spectrum, is that you don't know where they are on the spectrum, because one child with autism is completely different than another child with autism. And my journey may not be your journey, may not be the journey of the people that live across the street. You know, and so it's great sometimes to have these conversations to see whose lives are different and whose lives are a little bit similar to the life that you have. And so even though that we're in this quiet period now, I understand what it's like not to have that, to be stressed every single day, to be tired every single day, to want to cry every single day. There was a moment where every single day I was crying. Like that's how I put myself to sleep, was crying, because I did not know what to do with this unruly child that was having meltdowns and tantrums and things like that, and couldn't find childcare and always being called up for school for behaviors and all these things. And I was scared. I was scared for his future. I didn't know what the future held for him. And it's still scary because he will always need to have someone. He will not be able to live independently. Someone will always have to be there. Fortunately, you know, my daughter, she's taken on that charge. She was like, Mom, when you're not there, I'm going to be there. But we're still planning on to make sure that that's a last resort, right? I don't want to just drop him off and be like, here, you know, here's your brother, take care of him. Now we're working on moving him into some sort of housing situation where there's someone there to watch him, so that therefore, you know, my role again will switch, because I won't be his main caregiver anymore. You know, someone else will be his main caregiver, and I will be there to visit him and make sure things are okay, and his sister can come and visit him and things like that. But that's just preparing him for when I'm not around, because that's something that you have to think about.
Mhm.
What happens when I'm not here? Who makes sure that he's taken care of? And that keeps some of us up late at night.
Yes.
Mhm.
Okay, you talked about stress. What were some of the ways to reduce your stress during that time?
Well, I turned to wine. That's not the best. That's not the best coping mechanism, right? Um, so I don't suggest that. But having people to talk to, that you can really talk to about the things that are going on in your life, that's extremely helpful. One of my son's teachers became my best friend, and she was a special ed teacher, and she understood. And we had a group of special ed teachers and moms and parents that would get together and talk about the things that were going on in our lives, to help us feel less alone
Mhm.
in this journey, because loneliness and feeling isolated is one of the things that happen because nobody else understands, or you think that no one else understands what you're going through, and you can't talk to people about the things that are going on in your child's life. So that's important. Scheduling time for you. And I know a lot of you are going to say, I don't have time. You do. It takes 5 minutes here and 5 minutes there, and being purposeful with those 5 minutes, even if it means waking up 5 minutes early and just laying there. And that's your time by yourself. When you're standing in line in the grocery store, just taking that time to just breathe. Those are the things that are extremely helpful. Finding those moments, when you drive up in the car in your driveway, and before you come in, just sit there for 5 minutes and collect yourself.
Mhm.
Now, some people take up journaling, which is great, because if you don't have someone to talk to, you can always talk to your journal. Your journal doesn't judge you. Your journal doesn't care about grammar. It doesn't care about punctuation. And you can pour your heart out to your journal. I highly suggest counseling. I highly suggest finding a therapist if you can, especially if you're feeling isolation, especially if you're feeling depressed, because those are legit feelings. Like, you may be dealing with grief and you didn't even know it,
Yeah.
because the life that you thought that you had doesn't exist. And it's okay to grieve that loss. You may had a child, because my child started to develop, like everyone else normally, started to develop normally, and then all of a sudden he was a different kid. And I mourned that loss of that boy that was there before, knowing that he was never going to play baseball or football or basketball, and knowing my child really wasn't going to graduate from high school, and knowing that he may not ever get married, he may not ever be able to drive, that he will always have to have someone in their house. Those are things that I had to come to grips with
Mhm.
as a parent, and it's okay to feel that loss. And so I highly suggest going to therapy, and talking to someone to help you sort out those feelings in a more healthy way. It helps. It really does.
Okay. What are some tips for parents with kids with autism?
Number one, don't stop comparing yourself to other parents. Stop comparing your kids to other kids, even their siblings. Don't compare them to their other siblings. Number two, really get to know your child and learn to trust your gut. Trust your inner being, because a lot of people are going to tell you what you should do, what you should be thinking. Have you tried this? They mean well. They do. But you know your kid. You know what's best for them. It's so funny because a lot of times they say things like individuals with autism, they need structure and they have to have a schedule 24/7. And what we're finding now that kids are not in school is that some of our kids are thriving without a lot of structure. And so just because 30% of the kids, are great with this method doesn't mean that your kid is going to be great with this method.
Right, right.
And so understand the way that your child thinks, the way your child learns, the way your child has fun, and the way your child communicates. Even if they don't communicate using words or verbally, your child is still communicating. And so learn what it is that they're trying to say to you and incorporate those things in this life, this journey that they have. Know that they're not going to adapt to you, but you need to adapt to them. And adapting to them means releasing control. And that's hard for a lot of parents to release control. And so just let them be. I did so much better with Quan when I just let him be and observed his world and then figured out where I fit in his world. And so, yeah, that's my advice.
Okay. What are some causes of behavior changes in autistic children?
Stress and anxiety. And before we started recording, we talked a little about that. When your child is stressing out, they show you physically that you or something is aggravating them, and they'll start showing you signs. Some kids twitch, some kids will verbalize, some kids will get up and start pacing. For a fact that they are not happy with something. Changes in routine, making promises you can't keep, being disappointed in things. A lot of kids don't like surprises. They just don't.
No.
Don't like surprises at all. If your kids have sensory issues, anything too loud, anything too hot, anything too cold, buying brand new clothes that are itchy, all these things can cause behaviors. Even having them do something that they don't like. Like one of the things is escaping. I don't want to do this, so I'm going to escape. So I'm going to show a behavior. Or it can be attention seeking. You're not paying attention to me, so I'm going to do this behavior so that you can pay attention, because negative behavior or negative attention is just as good as positive attention for a kid who's seeking attention from you. So they'll do something that they know they're not supposed to do because maybe you're spending too much time at work with a new friend or with the sibling, you're talking on the phone, whatever. So there's a lot of things that can cause behavior. But right now, our kids are dealing with anxiety because their whole life has just been thrown a loop. They're not in school, they don't have their friends, their routine is different. They're seeing you all day long, right? And they're like, and some of our kids don't have the language to express that I don't like what's going on. I miss my friends. I miss my life. Some of them may have had plans, and because of social distancing, they can't go to that party or that trip, or whatever it is. Their birthdays have been ruined because they can't have a party. All these things are going. They may not even have their favorite food at the grocery store anymore. All these things are going on, and they may not be able to express that I don't like this. And so you may see a rise in behaviors. This is not the time to punish your kid. This is your time to love on them and to understand that they're scared too.
Okay. Now, you have a laundry business.
I do.
You want to talk
I
about that?
absolutely. So I have a lingerie valet business. And people are like, how did you come up with that idea? Remember when I told you that my son does his chores?
Mhm.
Well, when I was thinking about what kind of local service business that I wanted to do, it was on a Friday, and Friday is the day that my son does laundry. I don't say anything. He picked the day, right? So Friday is his day, and after he gets up and has his breakfast and does his morning routine, he does his laundry. And that's one of the things that he does very well and independently. So I was like, I'm gonna start a laundry business. And I was like, Contessa, do you do laundry? I don't do my laundry. I have other people that do laundry. But what is so unique about this laundry business? So we go to people's homes, we pick up their laundry, we wash it, dry it, fold it, and give it back to them the next day. But the thing that makes this company different than other companies is that we're going to be training individuals like my son, training individuals with autism and other disabilities how to do laundry so that they can be gainfully employed. Because one of the problems that we have is having adults who want to work but can't find employment. So right now, I mean, they've even done away. They used to bag groceries. They don't even bag groceries anymore. They've gotten rid of that. But most of the times they can't even do that. So they're either doing arts and crafts, which really isn't a job. That's a pseudo job, right? They're doing yard work, so they're out there doing mowing lawns and picking up leaves and things like that. And that might not be your child's gifting, right? To be out there for 12 hours a day mowing lawns. Some of them have like shredding businesses where they're shredding paper. Um, and so there's not a lot of options out there for individuals with autism. And so this is my way of giving back to my community, is teaching them how to wash, dry, and fold laundry. And we'll be having commercial laundry. So we'll have some of these big companies that will come and drop off their stuff. And I'm working right now with partnering up with a living facility who already have people who are looking for work and training them on how to do laundry. So I'm so excited about that.
All right. And lastly, you are an author. So you
I
want to talk about
am.
your book?
Uh, so I have a book. And if you look up, Contessa Louise or Contessa Cooper on Amazon, it'll take you straight to my book. And it's called Mad at the World, How to Find Peace When You're a Special Needs Parent. And let me tell you something. Remember when we talked about grief and we talked about dealing with a loss? I had all of that stuff built up. And I didn't intend to write a book on forgiveness, but it really is a book about forgiveness and tips on how to forgive. And you may be saying, Tessa, what is that I need to forgive? Well, number one, forgive you as a parent, because you may not have known what was going on with your child. Might have made mistakes. I know I've made tons of mistakes, right? Because I don't care how many books you read on autism, that book is not about your child. You may read that book and be like, this book is not about my kid at all, and I don't know what to do with my kid. And so you made some mistakes. And so it gives you some tips on how to forgive yourself as a parent for maybe not making what you thought was the best decision for your family. It also talks about forgiving your friends and your family because they may not know how to react, because this is new for them too. They have questions, or they may have known something, or they may have read something on the internet that's not right, or they may be telling you what to do 24/7. And so you have to forgive them. And sometimes you may lose friends, right? Because your kid can't hang out with their kids. And so the friendship just kind of disappears. And you may be grieving the loss of that friendship. And so it tells you how to forgive your friends. There's also a section on forgiving professionals like teachers and doctors and things like that, because they are overworked. and underpaid. And they may have hundreds of kids that they care for and manage. And sometimes they may say something and do things that you may be like, why did you say that to me? Or how does this impact my kid? Or that may be the wrong advice, or things like that. Because of course they don't know your kid like you know your kid.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I talked about, I had a doctor who sent my kid to the emergency room, giving me half of advice, right? They didn't give me the whole plan. They gave me half the plan and sent my kid to the ER. And my kid had a severe allergic reaction and almost died. And so, you know, having to deal with these other people that you're supposed to trust,
Mm-hmm.
how could you do something harmful? They made a simple mistake. It was literally a simple mistake. By not reading my kid's chart fully and missing the part where they were highly allergic to nuts. And then there was a chapter on forgiving God. And that was the most controversial chapter because they're like, God doesn't need forgiveness. That wasn't for him. That was for me. Because there were one night where I just screamed like, why are you doing this to me? Is this punishment? What do I have to do? You know, you're supposed to love me. This isn't love. You know, and they tell you things like, God picked you to be the perfect parent for this child. Sometimes it doesn't happen that way.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's just the way the cards are dealt. And so I had to learn forgiveness, to not be so angry at the man upstairs for the way that my life has turned out, and to just deal with things the very best way that I can, and knowing that I'm not being punished, and know that I'm still loved, and know that I'm going to get through this one day at a time. So yeah, mad at the world, how to find peace when you're a special needs parent, because believe me, you're going to need lots of peace on this journey.
Yes. All right. Is there anything you would like to add? And I also want you to, in case someone wants to get into contact with you, what is your contact information?
Absolutely. So I am really easy to find. I'm all over social media at Contessa Louise. My website is contessalouise.com. And you can also find my autism community at unpuzzledcommunity.com. And what I want to leave each and every one of you with is to trust yourself, because you are your child's number one advocate.
Mm-hmm.
No one knows your child like you, and you have everything you need to be the best parent for your child. And never forget that. You are enough.
Okay. Thank you so much for coming in today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
All right. This is Queenie Clem with Queenie's Book Talk and Reviews. Happy reading. Bye, y'all.